This is The Gift of Fear. I'm just going to chat about the bits that I found particularly interesting. If you haven't read the book before, you might find it useful as a little taster review. If you have read the book, you might enjoy a refresher. Either way, I would love to hear your comments on it because it's got some controversial stuff in here. Hi everyone, I'm Rosie Blythe. I'm the author of the Princess Guide to Life book series. And on this channel, we talk about everything from spirituality to money to entertainment. And today I want to cover one of my favourite self-help books. I think it is so useful. It's packed full of information. By the way, this is part 2 of a video I had to split up because it got too long. So if you'd like to check out the first part, I'll link it below, but it doesn't really matter what order you watch them in. And a big part of this book is this idea that violence is this unpredictable thing that comes out of nowhere. That's just not true at all. It's very predictable. It follows particular clues and we can see it coming. And I don't know why people are so resistant to that idea, because it's actually reassuring, isn't it, to think, okay, you can predict when a situation is going to go south. You can see the clues that it's going to go that way, so you're not a helpless victim and like, oh, I don't know where this came from. So I have a topical example of this. A couple of days ago on Twitter, we all still call it Twitter, don't we? There was this video that started auto-playing, and it was this man just punching this woman over and over again, even when someone else was trying to protect her. Okay, do I have to say allegedly? I guess I do. The man allegedly in the video allegedly punching the woman that I saw with my own eyes. And I looked at the caption and it said that it was this YouTuber, Kypri Taylor, who I've never heard of because I don't really follow like the big YouTubers. I just have my own little niche group of people. So I thought I'll look up this guy and see what kind of videos he makes. And I saw some videos and he has red flags coming out of his ears, this guy. You know, he has these videos where he clearly sees women as his property. Like if he's dating a woman, he gets to say what she wears and where she goes and who she's allowed to talk to. So I think that's really interesting, because if you know someone like this, if you are dating someone like this, that's a red flag. So, and this is like someone when he's in a good mood. He's like, yeah, this is the side of me that I want to show to, you know, anyone who wants to view my videos. Yeah, this is my good side. If a guy is doing stuff like that, if they're openly referring to her as property, like, yeah, she's not allowed to go out without me, she's not allowed to wear that, she can't talk to that guy. That tells you something about that person. That he is, well, it tells you all sorts of things about his insecurities. And I just have to say, like, don't be surprised if a man who is, you know, in a good mood, he's grabbing his girlfriend around the neck. Don't be surprised if when he's in a bad mood, he punches her. Like, that shouldn't be a shock to anyone. And yes, joking about it counts, because how many really sweet and kind guys do you know who would think it was hilarious to joke about beating up their girlfriend? So I think we all need to get better at kind of seeing the signs, even when we don't want to. Even when it's like some guy who seems really cute and he's really funny and he says all these like really charming things. Like, if he's doing stuff like this, you can see that that is part of his personality. And so other red flags he mentions are someone who's not fazed by violence or gore. I mean, we all like a good horror movie sometimes, but I think he's probably talking about people who just like absolutely like no sensitivity whatsoever to really like violent, horrible things, and being very calm in the face of an argument. And again, I don't think calmness in general is a bad thing. I think it's a superpower. But it's like, if someone is completely under control when everyone else is like, you know, feeling emotional, that could be a red flag. It could be that they, I don't know, I guess enjoy manipulating emotions. And also having to be in control, and this might often stem from them not being in control as a child. So it comes out in adulthood. One thing that Gavin mentions that I think is really interesting is that people will often joke about something rather than say, I feel scared, I think there's something dangerous here. They'll make a joke. So he gives an example of a business, and when they get a package that they think is slightly suspicious, somebody says, well, I'm going to get out of here before the bomb goes off, and they leave, and then a bomb did go off. And they didn't have any inside information or anything. It was literally just, they said what maybe other people were thinking. But if you say it as a joke, then it's less embarrassing. They say many a true word spoken in jest. I think this is very true. I mean, there was a particularly horrible case in the UK where a woman, Sarah Everard, was murdered by a policeman, Wayne Couzens. And it turned out his nickname at work among his work colleagues was the rapist. So yeah, people know when there's a red flag, but they can't always say it. They can't, you can't just accuse people of stuff, but you maybe would give them a nickname like the weirdo or the stalker or whatever, and that's obviously what they did. So it's definitely worth noting what jokes people make about people that you know, like in your circle. Maybe if someone has a nickname that suggests they're a bit dodgy, then it may not be a joke. So he talks about stalking, and I remember back in the day when I was a teenager and I'd read women's magazines, and it would always be like, oh, we can't do anything until they actually hurt you. I think these days it is much better, and I think people are more aware of stalking as being something that really like screws up your life if someone is doing that to you. And it happens to so many people as well, like men and women. So he talks about some of the signs, and one weird one that I was like, oh, that's strange, is that when you've told somebody, like, leave me alone, they'll ask you for a small favour. And I guess people are sort of inclined to go, oh, all right then, because it's like, if it means you'll go away, I'll do this little thing for you. But it just kind of reinforces the whole thing and keeps them in your life. And also, they may not be the most logical people, so threatening them with police or restraining orders, which is always the thing that people talk about, that may not have any effect on them, because if you're kind of screwy in the head, then maybe you don't care about the police. So he makes the point that restraining orders only work on people who weren't going to do violence anyway. If they are like a proper bona fide, like, I'm going to murder you, then a restraining order is not going to stop them. Also, the more you engage with it, the more it will escalate. That is just an absolute fact that there's no getting away from it. If you engage, then you are going to invite more of it. So like, if they call you 100 times and you ignore it like 99 times, and then you pick up on the 100, like, what do you want? Go away, leave me alone. What you actually taught them is if they keep persevering and keep calling, you will eventually pick up. So you've just taught them a lesson that you really didn't want to. So he talks about a like celebrity stalker who was writing to like a bunch of different celebrities, and it was the one who responded like, leave me alone, stop writing, who then got stalked more. He kind of forgot all the others and was like, oh, this one engaged, let's go with that one then. So he's quite sort of anti the police and how they deal with stalkers. So he said that sometimes like detectives were like, well, see, it really escalated. It's a good thing we were here. And it's like, no, it escalated because you were involved. It sounds actually quite similar to childbirth when people say like, oh, once we got to hospital, things started going wrong, and it's a good thing we were there because they were able to. And it's like, well, it's probably because you got to hospital and your body was stressed out because you were in a weird environment and everything was like the antithesis of what a mammal wants when it gives birth. But anyway, that's another video, isn't it? So he's very anti-restraining orders. And says that they're not worth the paper they're written on, and they probably will make it worse, which is interesting. And obviously I'm not saying like if you're being stalked you should ignore what the police tell you, but I just think it's very much worth reading a book by someone who has studied this and worked for decades in this very area. And he said, again, it's not unpredictable. People don't just snap. They will be like, people know that they're weird. And he talks about someone who was called Crazy Pat at work, much like, the rapist policeman. People know when there's something weird about someone. And it's like a myth that we perpetuate every time we say something like, oh, well, how could we have known? Who could have seen that coming? And it's like, well, anyone who's paying attention, really. So he has a big section on relationships, as you might expect, and points out that men killing their partners is very, very common. And that, it never fails to shock me, like the relationship that you have with someone where you're supposed to be like the two people who love each other the most, and that relationship is the one where people end up hating each other. And obviously, well, you see divorces and stuff when people are very bitter, but for someone to actually kill their partner is, it's crazy, isn't it? But it happens so often. And obviously I'm sure like there are going to be guys going, oh, women do it too. It happens a lot when it's men killing women. I don't know why that is, but if we pretend that that isn't the case and we try and fudge the numbers and be like, oh, it's both, then we're never going to get to the answer of why it happens, are we? So we've got to be honest with ourselves. So Gavin definitely has some tough love for us, because he says the first time a woman gets hit, she's a victim. The second time, she's a volunteer, which is pretty harsh. But I think it's interesting that he says this when his own mum was a victim of domestic violence. So he has been in this situation. He's seen it all firsthand. And I wonder if he's maybe a little bit bitter that he had that experience as a child growing up. He does also say in those situations, both parents participate in hurting their children. Yeah, which it is true. I mean, it sounds awful, but it's true. Like, if you are a woman and your husband is hitting you and your children and you are staying, then yeah, you are participating in your children getting hurt. So yeah, but I don't know necessarily what the answer is, because social services are so much like they want the children to carry on seeing both parents, understandably. I think sometimes it should be supervised, because if you can't trust somebody not to hurt their kids, then maybe they shouldn't see them on their own, but it's so hard to do, isn't it? But yeah, I think he is very, very tough on this, but he's not wrong. Now, I have to tell you, my dad always used to say to me when I was a little kid, he was like, anytime, you know, when you're grown up and if you're with a man and he hits you, you must leave the first time, because no matter what he says, no matter how much he apologizes and says he'll never do it again, he will do it again. And I remember, like, as I was growing up, I was kind of like, why was my dad telling me that when I was a kid? Like, he was obviously telling me, like, years and years before there was any chance of me being in a relationship with someone who did that. But it did work, because then as I grew up and I was reading, like, women's magazines, and you'd read these stories about, you know, some woman going, oh yeah, my boyfriend, he hit me one time and he cried and he said he'd never do it again. And then he did. And I'd be like, yeah, that's just what my dad said. So his messaging really went in. So I guess it really did work to tell me that. But I have to say, I did not really understand this dynamic until, and this is a bit embarrassing, because it was a TV show that actually showed me the light on this. Because I've always been like, why do women stay? If someone's making you miserable, if someone's hurting you, why on earth would they do that to themselves? And then it was when I was watching Big Little Lies, and Nicole Kidman is married to Alexander Skarsgård in it. I can't remember their characters' names. And they have this, like, great marriage. They're really into each other. They love each other, and it's, like, sexy, and they're good friends and everything. But occasionally he hits her. And I was like, oh, she doesn't leave because she doesn't want to leave. Like, she wants this man. That is her partner in life. She doesn't want to end that relationship. She wants it to just be all the good bits, but so she takes the bad bits with it. And that's when I actually understood the dynamic of domestic violence in relationships. So thank you, TV, for showing me something I didn't understand before. I was just like, why don't they just leave? And also, I mean, you hear more and more stories these days about when women do leave, that's when the men kind of really, I mean, there was a horrific story recently in the UK where there was a young woman and she finished with her boyfriend and he came and killed her mum and her sister. And it's just like, all she did was end the relationship. And he came in with a crossbow. So, yeah. This is why it's so important to see the red flags when you meet a guy, so that you don't get involved in relationships. Obviously, people still will. And I think sometimes people do sort of cleverly sort of conceal the worst of themselves. And it's when you know, get married or when you have a baby or whatever, when you make some commitment to them and they think, oh, she can't get away now. But the red flags will have been there. And also Gavin talks about the sort of punishment and reward cycle. So a woman, she will be like, oh, you know, one day maybe he's going to go back to how he was when we were like on our honeymoon, when it was all just happy. And it's that sort of promise that it could go back to that. It's like a carrot on a stick in front of her that she's just like, oh, maybe it will get better. And that's what keeps her in the cycle. So Gavin talks quite a lot about the O.J. Simpson case. Obviously his wife Nicole was murdered. He was acquitted of the murder, and then he wrote a book called If I Did It. So Gavin kind of talks quite a lot about this, but I just thought this was really interesting. There is this one particular moment where the police refused to get involved when he's breaking in. I think this was after the divorce, so he didn't live there. And the police were just like, oh, well, you know, he used to live there. Just weren't interested at all. And that just reminded me of the Gabby Petito documentary that was on Netflix, where the police were involved, and there's, you know, video footage of them just being like, no, it's just fine. And then she ends up dead. And it's these relationships that seem happy on the outside. So Gavin points out that you don't pick a man on his potential, because that fake version of him living in your imagination does not exist. You've got to go with the guy who's actually in front of you. So Gavin talks about this stuff, and I'm just going to read you a little bit. So a woman says, you're wrong. There's no way you can tell when a man will turn out to be violent. It just happens out of nowhere. She went on to describe how her ex-husband, an avid collector of weapons, became possessive immediately after their marriage, made her account for all of her time, didn't allow her to have a car, and frequently displayed jealousy. Could these things have been warning signs? And in continuing her description of this awful man, she said his first wife died as a result of beatings he gave her. And if you are with a man and he claims his ex is crazy, maybe she's crazy, but maybe she just says some stuff about him that he doesn't like to hear. And sometimes you'll see like these TikTok videos and they're like, some woman's like, oh yeah, he did beat up his ex, but he'd never do that to me. It's like, he would. And Gavin points out that spousal killings, so when a husband or wife murders their spouse, they don't happen in the heat of the moment. They're very calm and planned. And also it's leaving that gets the woman killed, sadly. And he points out that murderers will often kill themselves rather than like accept rejection from you. So do you think a restraining order is really going to have that much effect on them? No, probably not. And that is all we have time for today. I hope you'll join me next time when we'll be continuing this deep dive into the gift of fear, taking a look at some of the research into mass violence as well as workplace red flags. As always, thank you for liking the video, thank you for subscribing to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.